Hello, welcome back to Oikonomia. Today we are going to discuss the idea of different shapes of economic recovery. Let's have a look into this. We can see that when it comes to economic recovery, when we say something called recovery can happen when there's a crisis. So this is something that shows a need for recovery. So first of all, there would be a crisis like what happened during the 1930s or what happened during the 2008 or what happened during the pandemic period or what happened during the recent crisis, the banking crisis that happened in the US economy, like that. So there would be some shock in the economy, and this economic shock would demand a recovery. And when we say recovery, this involves coming out of the crisis period. There would be various attempts made by the central government, the monetary authority, etc. so as to equip the economy to come out of the crisis, which you call as the recovery phase. So this recovery might be taking various forms, and this would be depicted using certain alphabetic notation, and this would involve something called the V-shape recovery. It will involve U-shape recovery. It will involve elongated U-shape recovery. Then there can be something called W-shape recovery. There can be something called L-shape recovery. There can be some other shapes as well. But we in this session would be discovering the prominent and the most common type of recovery, the V-shape, U-shape, W-shape and L-shape recovery. Now moving to the basic difference that you could see between the different types of recovery. This involves the time taken for the economic activity to come to the normalized state. Before the crisis, the economy might have gone through a normalcy state, but it was the shock, economic shock, that made the economy to a dip. The shock had created a fall or a dip in the economic activity, and this is what we call as the crisis period. This is what we call as the crisis period. So we have to recover, and this recovery would be taking some time for certain economies, whereas this recovery would be happening as soon as possible for several other economies. Let's see how all these things would be happening and how all these things would be different from one another. So these can be the summary of the different scenarios that we can have. In the first case, like what you can see in the dark blue shape, what you see here is the V-shape recovery. So that means this is something which is very quick. So as soon as it reaches down, as soon as it reaches this bottom point, it all of a sudden would start recover. So there would be an immediate growth that would happen. So the growth decline would be immediate, like that the growth would also be immediate. Okay, so the dip is also immediate and the growth recovery would also be immediate. That is all about the V-shape recovery. And what about the U-shape recovery? Starting from the very same point, we could see that. Just take this blue line. So where the recovery will take the form or shape of a U. Here you could see that once it reaches the down, it will stay for this particular level for some time. Only after this it will recover. So there would be a shrink in the growth. And this happens with slow return to trend growth. So this is how you could see, once you reaches down, you will stay at this point for some time. Then only you start recovery. Now, having discussed the U-shape recovery, then let's consider the next shape, which is the W-shape recovery. We start from the very same point of the crisis, then we reach the crisis period, then you start recovering. So what here happens is, you will be having multiple waves here. So here, this was the starting point. From there you reach down. This was the initial downward point, downmost point, bottommost point is this. Then you gradually move to up. Then you gradually move up. But what happens? Again you come down. Again you reach bottom point. So there are multiple rebounds here, and this would be preventing the overall long-term economic stabilization. But after some point, what happens is that the economy could recover. Okay, so that's all about the W-shape recovery. Now let's consider the L-shape recovery. Again, we start from the point. The economy will move like this, and now we move in this way. This is how you move. So what happens here? There is a severe decline, and this severe decline would be without any return to the actual growth. The actual growth which was there initially was at this particular point, but now from this point you have reached this down, and return to the earlier growth won't be possible for many years. And that's all about the L-shape recovery or L-shaped recovery. It will take many years for the economy to return to this point of growth. Now, having said all these things, let's consider each of these recovery stages in detail. To start with L-shaped recovery, we can measure time along the x-axis and GDP of the economy along the y-axis. Here, L-shaped recovery would involve a slow rate of recovery. As I've told you, the rate of recovery would be very slow. It would be very slow. So, what you could see is that there would be something called unemployment, which would be persisting in the economy, and also the performance of the economy would be stagnant. The economy will be moving through a stagnant phase, and this would occur following an economic recession, and this will make the economy to have a decline without a corresponding steep recovery. So this is how the L-shaped recovery happens. So this was the normal path of the economy, the normal state of growth of economy. From this point, what happens? All of a sudden, the economy reaches a dip, a bottom. From here, the economy is not able to come up. It has to move with a low rate of growth, a low GDP. And it might take the economy some years and years to come back to the original initial growth path. So that's it about L-shaped recovery. Now let me give you an example of L-shaped recovery. This was something that happened in Japan, and this was something that you can consider as the lost decade in Japan. So what we could see is that it was leading up to the 1990s, during this phase, the Japanese economy was experiencing a remarkable economic growth. Okay. So, in 1980s, Japanese economy was considered to be the first economy. It was ranked first for the gross national product or production per capita, real estate, and also with respect to stock market prices, it was quickly rising, very much quickly rising. But there was something called an asset price bubble that had created a shock in the Japanese economy. So the Bank of Japan was raising the interest rate in 1989. There was something called a stock market crash, which followed the asset price bubble in Japan. As a result of this kind of a shock, which had impacted both the capital market as well as the banking sector, the economic growth of Japan had slowed down from 3.89% to 1.14%. So that means there was a very sharp dip that happened, and this was between the period 1991 to 2003. Okay, so what we could see is that till 1990s, till the beginning of 1990 period, Japanese economy was very much fast progressing. But in 1991, the problem started. During 1990, there was during the initial phase of 1990, there was not that much problem, but all that started in 1989. But the shock was felt towards the end of 1990, and from 1991 to 2003, Japanese economy began to have an L-shaped kind of recovery. Now, moving to the V-shaped recovery, here, as I've told you earlier, here the economy would be recovering. Again, we measure time along the x-axis and GDP along the y-axis. Economy would be suffering a very sharp period of decline, and this is what is shown here. So this is the normal growth path of the economy. From this point, the economy will go to a very sharp dip or decline with respect to its economic activity as a result of some economic shock or something. From this point, it will very strongly jump to the normal growth path like this. And this recovery is identified to be the strongest of all types of recovery, and the normal shape of recession as strength of economic recovery is typically closely related, and this is something related to the severity of the recession that happens. So from this, it had come to a very sharp dip. From the dip, you could see that economy had recovered. That's all about the V-shaped recovery, and this would be the strongest as well as the fastest. Now again, let me give you an example to this. This was something that happened in 1953 in the United States economy. We could see a relatively brief recession and the mild kind of recession that happened. And as a result of this mild recession, there was only something like 2.2% decline in GDP that came. And although the unemployment rate that happened was 6.1%. Now, growth began to slow in the third quarter of 1953, but by the fourth quarter of 54, the economy was able to come back and take its pace, and it could be back at a pace well above the trend. And that is what we could see in the case of the V-shaped recovery in the real life scenario. Now, having discussed so, let's consider something called U-shaped recovery. As I've told you, this is something that would show a kind of economic crisis and the recovery from the very same, which will take the form of U, and whether it is a deep U or whether it is a normal U would depend upon how fast the economy could recover. Again, we are measuring time along the x-axis and GDP along the y-axis. Here the GDP would recover, but it would be very much slower than what we could see in the case of V-shaped recovery. So here the industrial output would be declining sharply, and it would stay for this period. It would stay for this particular point, or stay at this particular point for some time. Then it will be maintaining this lowest GDP for some time, and that means the economy would be depressed for some time, and this might be taking something like 12 to 24 months before it could bounce back. So bounce back means recovery state. This is what is meant by bouncing back. Having said so, let's consider the W-shaped recovery. Again, we can measure time along the x-axis and GDP along the y-axis. Here you will be having so many problems. Again, this would be the normal steady state of growth path. And in the case of W-shaped recovery, there would be a sharp decline. Okay, from this point, the economy would be coming down all of a sudden, and the economy would be taking several steps. As a result, to an extent, it will be coming up, but again there would be a sharp decline. Then also the economy would be taking several steps, it will increase. So the middle section of W, that is something that that shows you a significant bear market. So what does it mean by bear market? The seller's market kind of thing. And this could be something, the W-shaped recovery shows that as soon as it comes to a recovery, as soon as it comes to a crisis, the economy thinks that okay, after taking some policies we can recover, and that is why it had gone for effective implementation of some policy, and for the very same reason it could go for a V-shaped recovery initially, but before reaching the earlier state of steady economic normal growth path, it will come down again, like what you could see here. It suffers more, and this would be paralyzing the economy. Again, the economy would be taking several policies and come up, and that is what we can consider with respect to the W-shaped recovery. I'll give you examples. So this was something that happened during the early 1980s in the US economy. From January to July of 1980, the economy was experiencing something similar to a recession, some initial recession you can say. Then it was taking several measures, steps, etc. to recover from the crisis, and it entered the recovery for almost a full year before it dropped down again to a second recession. And this happened in 1981 to 1982. Then also the American economy had gone for several policies which make the economy to come up. So that's how it happened. That's how it came. I hope you could have an understanding regarding the different shapes of economic recovery. I request you to like and subscribe to this channel for more videos. Also, you can join our free Telegram community to discuss your doubts there. I'll be providing the link of this in the description box. Also, you can download the Learn Economy app, for which also I'll be providing the link in the description box. That's all. Thank you for watching.